Good afternoon, everybody here. Addressing, of course, Mr. Yu and a distinguished IOC member from Singapore, Mr. Semiang Ng. We had all intended to be here today in the company of Dr. Kim Un-yong in honor of his foundation of Korea's modern sports distinction, recognizing his inimitable wisdom. Instead, we mourn his sad and sudden departure. Yet, we celebrate in recognition that he had more profound impact on the ascent to acclaimed international status of his own nation than any other leader than Sigrid Edström of Sweden in the early 20th century. Like Edström, Kim Un-yong's influence extended to embrace the world of sport. A couple of years before the Seoul Games, Howard Cosell, foremost of American sports commentators, stridently forecast, "The Seoul Games will never happen. You read it here first." Yes, there was some concern for the prospect of the people of the post-apocalyptic Peninsular War who had risen from the ashes of barbarism, yet remained central to the political Cold War. May I remind younger listeners that in the early 1950s, there were a mere 2,500 motor cars in the whole of Korea. Only some 500 rail locomotives, of which 150 were unserviceable. Yet in the space of a mere 3 decades, Korea, a nation so long victimized by colonialization, had miraculously blossomed. In the International Olympic Committee's immediate recount of those memorable games, published by Goran Takac, I wrote that Korea gave the festival the serene culture of Asia, the work ethic of Germany, the financial acumen of the United States. What I later realized I missed from that comment was imagination. If one man, more than any, possessed the concept of what an Olympics might achieve for his country, it was Kim Un-yong. Few people globally knew Korea when, in 1974, Kim discreetly bid for the hosting of the World Shooting Championships in opposition to Mexico City. His gamble of a $5 per head accommodation offer won the vote. From this relatively tiny initial platform in international sport, Korea metaphorically never looked back. Not only miraculously defeating Nagoya of Japan in a 1981 bid to host those games of 1988, but hosting also the Asian Games of 1986 in Seoul, Busan 1997, Incheon 2014, and of course, notably, the World Cup, jointly with Japan in 2002. At that time, in 1988, Korea had diplomatic relations with less than half the United Nations. Yet, given the guidance of Kim Un-yong, along with many other people I know, within 6 months of the Seoul Olympics, the Korean flag was universally recognized. In 1983, Kim Un-yong, together with State President Roh Tae-woo, visited London. And I remember sitting with him in a small ministry office, discussing these prospects for an unheralded games in which he was promoting the prospects. And at that time, I have to tell you, in much of the Western world, Korea was in the same mythological mind as antiquities in China. We, I regret to say, but I've been able to change that in many years, knew so little of Korea. From the launch pad of achieving the hosting of the shooting event and working intimately with the then new International Olympic Committee President, Juan Antonio Samaranch, Kim Un-yong rose inexorably on the international sporting ladder. Having founded in 1972 the Kukiwon headquarters of Taekwondo, then becoming president of the newly inaugurated World Taekwondo Federation a year later, his authoritative leadership introduced intelligent administration across the global landscape. President, for instance, of GAIF, whom some of you remember, forerunner of Sport Accord, the General Assembly of International Sports Federations. His introduction of Taekwondo to the Olympic program, which was no mean feat. His own membership of the International Olympic Committee in 1986, then to its executive board, and subsequently vice president. In 2001, he was runner-up behind Jacques Rogge of Belgium in the contest to succeed Samaranch as IOC president. At the time, there was criticism of his suggestion that the IOC should give a fund for administration to the office of each IOC member. People thought, well, that was out of place. But in fact, within a year or two, that very proposal took root. Surviving domestic political envy and reprisal, but I have to remind everyone of hugely loyal support from more than a third of the IOC membership. Kim Un-yong continued to give his advice, his influence, in the most unobtrusive of manner, but with conviction that he'd given all these years to Korea, and he continued to inspire not only domestic but international sport. We shall miss him in many ways. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. David Miller.